The soft hum of a piano drifted through the air, blending with the gentle clink of glasses and the low murmur of conversation. The restaurant, nestled in the heart of the city, glowed with warm, golden light that reflected off every polished surface, a place meant for whispered promises and carefully crafted first impressions dressed in silk and charm. Ethan Blake stepped inside, adjusting the cuff of his tailored navy suit. At 35, he was one of the youngest CEOs in the state, respected for both his vision and restraint. Yet tonight, he felt slightly out of place. He had never liked blind dates, never had. But his best friend had insisted. "She's stunning and different," he had said. "Just give yourself a chance to see people outside of business deals." So Ethan came, more out of courtesy than curiosity. A hostess led him to a candlelit table near the window. Waiting there, legs crossed elegantly and wearing a flawless smile, was Sabrina. She stood to greet him, her red dress hugging her curves with confidence. Her brown hair cascaded in soft waves, and her red lips were perfectly painted. She extended her hand with practiced charm. "Ethan, right? I've been looking forward to this." Her voice was smooth and deliberate. He smiled politely and shook her hand. "Sabrina, nice to meet you." They sat. Within minutes, she was complimenting his company, quoting headlines, and reciting investment figures with uncanny precision. She laughed in all the right places and smiled on cue. Yet something felt scripted. Her eyes, though striking, were cold and calculating. More than once, Ethan noticed her glancing at her phone, tapping quickly before sliding it face down. He kept the conversation flowing, but his instincts prickled. Something was off. From the corner of his eye, a flicker of motion caught his attention. A young waitress moved between tables with quiet efficiency, blonde hair tied up high, no makeup, no flashy earrings. Her movements were clean and precise, her uniform crisp, her eyes alert. She had a quiet beauty, not the kind that turned heads instantly, but the kind that lingered. Her name was Emily Hart, and she noticed everything, every movement, every pause, every look. Earlier, she had seen Sabrina seated with a man in a black blazer. She had overheard enough to feel unsettled, enough to know this date wasn't what it seemed. Now, as Sabrina excused herself to the restroom, Emily made her move. She approached the table lightly. Ethan looked up, surprised. Emily placed a folded note beside his water glass. "She's not who you think." The handwriting was neat and deliberate. Ethan looked up at her, startled. She leaned in, her voice low but steady. "Before you arrived, I saw her with a man named Daniel. I overheard them talking about using this date to get close to you. She said she would charm you, steal project details, and help take your company down." Ethan's eyes narrowed, confusion sharpening into focus. "I don't know you," Emily added quietly, "but I couldn't pretend I didn't hear it." She straightened, turned, and walked away, returning to the counter as if nothing had happened. Ethan stared at the note, his mind reeling. Could it be true? He sat still, fingers grazing the edge of the folded paper. His eyes lingered on the simple yet heavy words, "She's not who you think." No reaction crossed his face. Calm and composed, he slid the note toward the edge of the table as if it were nothing more than a misplaced receipt. When Sabrina returned, her smile remained flawless, confident, charming. She carried herself like someone who believed she still had full control of the evening. Ethan returned the smile, warm and effortless. But behind his calm expression, something had shifted. He didn't confront her. He didn't question her. Instead, he listened. The conversation continued, but now he heard every word differently. He noticed how she slipped in the name of one of his senior directors. How she mixed up the timeline of a recent acquisition. Each small mistake was quickly masked with a playful laugh, a touch on his wrist, or a flattering remark. But Ethan, trained by countless boardrooms and negotiations, was no longer charmed. He noticed the subtle tilt of her phone when she thought he wasn't looking. The way her fingers tapped beneath the table. The tone she used when deflecting questions. The hesitation on simple business references. It was all too smooth to rehearsed. Then his phone vibrated discreetly. He glanced down. A short, low-resolution security clip from earlier that evening had been sent by a source he trusted. The restaurant's management team had worked with his company before, a quiet favor, called in without attention. The video showed Sabrina seated in the same booth, not alone. A man in a black blazer leaned toward her, speaking closely. There was no affection, only intensity, calculation. Their posture said everything. Ethan paused the video, staring at the frozen frame. Confirmation. He looked up slowly, his expression unreadable. Dinner ended without drama. No raised voices. No accusations. Just a quiet conclusion to an evening that had already revealed its truth. When the check arrived, Ethan reached for his wallet. He stood and buttoned his jacket with calm precision. Then he looked at her, really looked at her. His gaze was steady, cool, final. "Thank you," he said quietly. "But we won't be seeing each other again." No anger. No theatrics. Just truth, delivered with a grace sharper than any insult. Sabrina hesitated. For a moment, she held her smile like a shield, until she saw it in his eyes. She rose without a word, gathering her purse with a stiff flick of her wrist. Her heels clicked sharply across the floor. Though she didn't look back, Ethan could feel the tension in her shoulders as she walked away, defeated not by confrontation, but by silence. He remained standing for a moment, letting the weight of it settle. He never mentioned the note. Never spoke Emily's name. She had already risked enough. As the restaurant's low hum returned to its familiar rhythm, Ethan turned slightly. Behind the counter, Emily was wiping down a tray, pretending to be absorbed in her work. Her posture was tight, her gaze carefully avoided his. Ethan stepped forward and stopped at the counter, setting the menu down as any customer ready to leave might do. She glanced up, uncertain. He smiled, soft, sincere. "Have you had your coffee tonight?" She blinked, caught off guard, then shook her head almost imperceptibly. Ethan nodded toward a small table by the window, the same one where so much had just unraveled. It wasn't a move. It wasn't a favor. It was gratitude, offered in the gentlest way. Emily hesitated, then followed. No words were exchanged, but something had already begun to shift, something unspoken, something real. And Ethan knew that was the only truth worth holding on to tonight. Rain tapped gently against the canopy above the cafe's outdoor seating. The late afternoon light was dim and gray, casting a quiet stillness over the city. Ethan Blake sat across from Emily Hart, his espresso untouched, his attention fixed entirely on her. She sat upright, hands wrapped around a plain ceramic mug. Her blonde hair was damp at the edges, loose strands escaping the neat ponytail she usually wore at work. The uniform was gone, replaced by a light sweater and jeans, simple, modest, real. "Thank you," Ethan said after a moment of silence. "For the other night." Emily looked up, her eyes steady. "I couldn't walk away from something like that. I know it wasn't my place, but it was." "It was," Ethan replied. "You spoke up when most people wouldn't." She gave a small shrug. "Maybe. Or maybe I've just seen too many people get used and thrown away." Ethan leaned forward, intrigued. "That sounds like experience talking." Emily took a sip of her coffee before answering. "My mom's been sick for a few years. I work double shifts, this cafe during the day, a grocery store at night. We manage." Ethan's brow furrowed. "That's a lot." She gave a soft laugh. "It is. But you do what you have to when someone you love needs you." His gaze dropped to her hands, slender fingers rough in places. Tiny scars near her knuckles, a small burn mark on her wrist. Hands that worked. Hands that sacrificed. "I don't understand how someone like you noticed that scheme," he said quietly. "Most people would have ignored it and gone about their shift." Emily looked away for a moment, her tone thoughtful. "I notice people. It's hard not to when you serve them all day. Most talk and never really listen. You learn to pick up on little things, tones, glances, timing. That woman wasn't in love. She was in control." Ethan studied her with quiet respect. There was no bitterness in her voice, only calm clarity. "You're sharp," he said. Emily chuckled. "Is that your way of saying I don't look the type?" "I meant it as a compliment," he said sincerely. She nodded, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "I don't really dream big anymore. Life narrowed when my mom got sick. I take each day as it comes, pay the bills, try to smile through it. That's enough." Ethan was silent. Something about her reached a part of him he had kept locked away, the part that remembered what it meant to fight for something that mattered, to love without expecting anything in return. "You deserve more," he said quietly. Emily met his eyes. "Maybe. But I'm not waiting for a miracle." A beat passed. Rain filled the space between them. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her expression shifting. "I have to get back," she said, standing. Ethan rose with her. "Let me walk you to the corner." She shook her head gently. "It's just a block. You don't have to." "I know," he said. They stood beneath the awning for a moment longer than necessary. He looked down at her. She looked up at him. No promises, no flirtation, just something unspoken hanging in the misty air. Emily gave a soft smile. Thanks for the coffee. Ethan returned it. Next one's on me. She turned and walked into the rain, her steps light, her back straight. He watched her until she turned the corner. Even then, he kept looking. A cup of coffee had never felt so important. It was a gray Monday morning. Heavy clouds pressed low over the city, and traffic crawled through the streets. Ethan Blake, sharply dressed in a tailored navy suit, gripped the steering wheel of his sleek black car, his mind already occupied with an upcoming presentation for an important shareholder meeting. He turned onto a quieter street near a small park, hoping to save a few minutes. That was when he saw her. An elderly woman, walking slowly with a cane, stumbled on the uneven sidewalk. Her knees buckled, and in a terrifying instant, she fell backward onto the cold concrete. A few pedestrians glanced her way, then kept walking. No one stopped. Without hesitation, Ethan pulled over and jumped out of his car. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he called, already dialing emergency services. The woman's hand trembled as she tried to sit up. Her breathing was shallow. Ethan crouched beside her, placing a steady, reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Don't worry. I've got you. I'm taking you to the hospital," he said calmly. After a brief exchange with the operator, Ethan realized help might take too long. He made a decision. Carefully lifting the frail woman, he opened the rear door and eased her into the back seat, cushioning her head with his folded coat. At the hospital, the ER team quickly took her inside. A nurse handed Ethan a clipboard. "Can you fill this out, sir? You're listed as the person who brought her in." "I don't know her name," Ethan admitted. "But here's my contact information." He signed the form and sat in the waiting room for a moment, watching the rhythm of urgency and calm move through the ER. Something inside him felt quieter. He stood to leave, but a soft sob stopped him. On one of the cold plastic chairs sat Emily Hart. Her blonde hair was pulled into a messy ponytail, her eyes red. Her hands gripped the edge of her coat, as if to keep them from shaking. "Are you the daughter of the woman who just came in?" a nurse asked gently. Emily nodded, unable to speak. Ethan paused. Then, guided by something beyond logic, he walked toward her. She looked up, and their eyes met, shock, disbelief, and something deeply human colliding at once. "You," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You brought her here." He gave a small nod. "I saw her fall. I couldn't just drive by." Emily stood abruptly, her body tense, her eyes wide. I don't know how to thank you," she stammered. "I was running late. My second job." "She sometimes takes walks when I'm not home," her voice cracked, and she turned her face away. Ethan reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a card, and placed it gently in her hand. "If you ever need anything," he said quietly, "don't hesitate." He didn't offer pity. He didn't ask for gratitude. He simply looked at her with the same sincerity he had shown while helping her mother. "I hope your mother recovers soon," he added. "Toggle form." Then, he turned to leave, giving her the space she needed. Emily stood there for a long time, staring at the card, her heart pounding. Her tears were not only for her mother now, but for the overwhelming kindness she had just experienced. She had never expected to see him again, not like this. The man who had once sat across from her over late-night coffee, who had listened without judgment, who had believed her quiet warning, was now the same man who had saved the most important person in her life. Not because he had to, but because he chose to. And in that fluorescent-lit hallway, something shifted between them, unspoken, but deeply understood. Not just a chance meeting, but a connection. Maybe even the beginning of something more. Ethan tried to return to his usual rhythm. Early mornings, back-to-back meetings, forecasts and numbers, boardrooms filled with suits and controlled voices. But Emily's face kept appearing at the edges of his thoughts, uninvited, unforgettable. He found himself thinking about her more often than he expected. It wasn't just the courage she'd shown that night with the note, or the quiet strength she'd carried in the hospital hallway. It was something deeper, a resilience that stayed with him. Out of concern and curiosity, he asked someone on his security team, a man he trusted completely, to do a discreet background check. Nothing invasive. Nothing that crossed a line. "I just want to know where she's from," he said. "What kind of life she's had. Be respectful." What he learned only deepened his admiration. Emily Hart lived in a small apartment on the edge of the city, in a neighborhood most people like Ethan never visited. The building was old, the walls thin, the plumbing unreliable. She worked 2 jobs, waitressing at the cafe during the week and cleaning office spaces overnight. On weekends, she volunteered at a local youth center, teaching reading and writing to underprivileged children. No vacations. No polished social media life. No boyfriend. Just work, family, and community. Ethan leaned back in his chair after reading the report, silent. She had every reason to be bitter at the world, yet she wasn't. Days passed. Ethan didn't reach out, but he noticed in other ways, sometimes driving past the cafe on his way home, sometimes glancing at his phone when it lit up, half hoping for a message that never came. Then one rainy afternoon, it happened. Ethan was leaving a lunch meeting when he spotted her across the corporate district. The pavement shimmered with fresh rain, umbrellas blooming like dark flowers. Emily stood outside a pharmacy, clutching her bag to her chest. She looked tired. Nearby, an elderly security guard struggled with his umbrella, clearly soaked through. Without hesitation, Emily stepped toward him, lifted her own umbrella over his head, and waited until a bus arrived. Ethan watched from inside his car. By the time the guard boarded the bus, Emily was completely drenched. She turned and walked down the street, her coat clinging to her frame, her shoes soaked through. That was when Ethan noticed her shoes. The soles were cracked. One had a tear near the toe. She didn't seem to care. Ethan sat frozen behind the wheel, his heart thudding. What he felt wasn't pity. It was something warmer, something almost painful. It reminded him of his sister, kind, soft-spoken, always thinking of others. She had passed away years ago in a tragic accident. He never thought he'd meet anyone like her again. Until now. That evening, he returned to the cafe. Emily was behind the counter, tying an apron around her waist, when she noticed him. Surprise flickered across her face, followed by hesitation. Before she could speak, Ethan smiled gently. "I'm not here to make things awkward." She relaxed just a little. He rested a hand on the counter and met her eyes. "Would you consider working somewhere else?" Emily blinked. "Excuse me? I need someone like you," he said simply. "Not for coffee, for something that actually matters." She tilted her head. "What kind of work?" "My company's CSR division is expanding," Ethan replied. "We need someone who understands people, who sees what others miss, someone who actually cares." Emily's lips parted slightly. She didn't know what to say. Ethan continued, his tone calm but sincere. "I know it's a lot to ask, but you don't belong behind a counter. You belong somewhere you can build something." Emily stared at him, eyes wide. Then, quietly, she asked, "Why me?" His voice softened. "Because you helped me without knowing who I was. And you keep helping people every single day. That kind of character, you can't teach that." She looked down, then back up, something fragile, yet unbreakable shining in her eyes. "Can I think about it?" "Of course," Ethan said. "But I hope you say yes." And with that, he left, not with a contract, not with pressure, but with hope. Hope that the woman who had quietly changed the course of his life might soon become part of something even bigger. The lobby of Blake and Company gleamed with polished marble and soft lighting. Emily Hart stepped inside with hesitant strides, surrounded by the buzz of business suits and echoing heels. She clutched her new employee badge close to her chest. Administrative Assistant, CSR Division. 3 words that meant her world had shifted. Her first days were quiet. She spoke little, took notes, and listened carefully. But within the first week, people began to notice. Emily's organization, her calm under pressure, and her ability to make even interns feel seen set her apart. Ethan watched from a distance. She thanked the janitor by name. She brought coffee to the night security guards. She volunteered for the tasks others avoided. What impressed Ethan most was how she approached everything, big or small, with sincerity and care. They worked closely for the first time during a charity event for underprivileged children. The planning was a mess. Vendors canceled. A sponsor pulled out. Tension filled the boardroom. Emily quietly flipped through backup contacts, secured a local caterer, and rallied volunteers from the reading center she once worked with. The event went on. Laughter echoed through the park. Children with painted faces and sticky fingers clutched balloons. Ethan noticed Emily smiling as she knelt to help a little girl tie her shoelace. Later, when a journalist asked Ethan for a comment, he simply nodded toward Emily. "She's the reason today happened," he said. The next challenge came with a media backlash. A misinterpreted photo went viral, accusing the company of exploiting charity work for profit. Panic spread through the PR department. Emily stayed late, organizing facts, compiling testimonials from families they had helped, and drafting a response that was calm and honest. When Ethan read her report at 2 in the morning, something shifted in his chest again. Then came the school fundraiser. The street was filled with music, games, and laughter. Emily moved through the crowd with a clipboard, encouraging shy children to join in. Ethan stood nearby, watching her laugh with a boy who had just won a stuffed bear. Suddenly, chaos. A young boy darted into the street, chasing a balloon. A car turned the corner too fast. Before anyone could react, Emily dropped her clipboard and ran. She reached the boy in seconds, shoving him back toward the sidewalk just as the car screeched to a halt. But she stumbled. Her knees slammed into the pavement. Her palms scraped, bleeding. Ethan ran. By the time he reached her, she was sitting upright, trying to wave off the pain. Without a word, Ethan knelt, lifted her into his arms, and carried her to the car. At the hospital, once she was treated and bandaged, he stood beside her bed, gripping the rail tightly. "You scared me," he said finally, his voice low and unsteady. Emily blinked. "He was just a kid." "I couldn't." "I know," Ethan interrupted. He stepped closer, his eyes locked with hers. "But don't ever do that again without me next to you." His voice cracked. For the first time, Emily didn't see the CEO or the powerful man in a suit. She saw someone who cared deeply about her. Late afternoon sunlight poured golden warmth over the garden behind Ethan's estate. Leaves glowed, stone paths softened, and a gentle breeze whispered through the trees. Emily stepped through the French doors, her hand wrapped around her mother's. They paused on the terrace, taking in the flowering hedges, winding paths, and the small stone fountain murmuring at the center. "This is beautiful," Emily whispered. Ethan appeared behind them, dressed not in a suit, but in a soft blue sweater and dark slacks. He wasn't trying to impress. He was simply present. "I'm glad you came," he said. Mrs. Hart smiled politely. "Thank you for having us, Mr. Blake." "Please," he said with a light chuckle. "Call me Ethan. And thank you for raising someone as remarkable as Emily." Emily blushed, fingers tightening around her purse. Dinner was simple and warm. Nothing extravagant, just food that made people feel at home. Ethan served her mother first. He listened. He asked without interrupting. Slowly, her mother relaxed. "Over tea," Mrs. Hart spoke softly. "When Emily was 8, we had one winter coat between us." Emily shifted, embarrassed. "One day," her mother continued, "Emily came home without it. She said another girl's hands were blue from the cold, so she gave it away." "It wasn't a big deal," Emily murmured. "It was everything," Ethan said quietly, his throat tight. Later, as lanterns cast soft halos across the garden, Ethan suggested a walk. Emily agreed. Her mother stayed behind to rest. Fireflies flickered along the path. "You changed how I see the world," Ethan said at last. "I built my life on logic, deals, strategy, risk. But you invest in people, quietly and constantly. And it changes everything." "I just do what I can," Emily said softly. He stopped walking. She did too. "I used to think kindness was weakness," Ethan said. "Then I met you." His hand found hers, not tight, just enough. She looked up, eyes open and unafraid. For the first time in years, Ethan felt still. 1 year later, the community division felt brighter than ever. Children's drawings lined the walls. Every project felt human. At the center of it all was Emily Hart, now Director of Community Impact. Her mother had recovered well, and Ethan's 7-year-old niece, Lily, had grown inseparable from Emily. Ethan had changed too. Less steel. More warmth. One autumn afternoon, he asked Emily to meet him for coffee. At the same cafe where they first met, she found him waiting. A folded note rested beside her cup. Asterisk, "She's exactly who I hoped she'd be." Asterisk, she looked up, eyes wet. Ethan opened a small velvet box, revealing a simple ring. "You saved me that night," he said softly. "And every day after. Will you build this life with me?" Emily laughed through tears. "Yes. But only if the coffee is on you." He pulled her into his arms. And in that quiet cafe, a story that began with a warning ended with a promise. One built on trust, kindness, and love that grew slowly, but never wavered.